Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week, we are returning to Scadrial. We are opening up The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, going way back to 2008. Published Brandon Sanderson. Paul and Eliot, how are you?
I'm great.
Doing
We're
great.
kind of back at our we're back into our main series of our podcast right now. I guess we're mostly trying to go through Mistborn. We took a break for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, and that which was a lot of fun. If you haven't read that or looked at that, definitely go do so. But we're back. We're starting the Well of Ascension, and I'm excited. We're kind of going starting off, at least we're going kind of quickly through the first part, but I'm really excited about it. So I'm mostly really curious to hear what Elliot has to think. So
I too am excited for this book. Mistborn didn't rank quite as highly the first one as some of the other Sanderson books that I've read, but I'm really curious to keep going. There was so much in that first book that really caught my interest, and I really need to see where it's going, both with the magic systems and the characters and the planet as a whole. I'm extremely curious and really excited to keep going. Although I am rather confused by the book cover that I'm looking at in front of me. I just want to say
Okay, what do you
I've
got?
I've got the mass market paperback version, which has an incredibly sci-fi looking, like, ball of metal with laser beams shooting out or into it and shattered, like, it's probably, like, just glass, but it almost looks like spaceships or something flying around. It looks very sci-fi.
I don't know if I've seen that one before. Well, I have seen it
I
before. I don't know if I've really studied it before.
I agree. I know I've seen this. I think I actually own this version. Like I own my wife actually got that version. I had a different version, but like the mass market paperback, really easy, small, easy to bring with you. But yeah, the art on them is kind of funny. I mean, I've read the series and I'm not really sure how it relates, so that's kind of funny.
I Well, once I get all unpacked, I've been moving the last month or so. I do plan on buying the new um, paperbacks, the new covers that came out last year. I think look really really good. So I plan on getting those. Today we are going to be covering the entirety of part one of Mistborn. That's more chapters than we usually cover. And here's a quick explanation on why we're going to be doing that. So Stormlight 5 is fast approaching, and no, it doesn't really feel like that on the Stormlight day counter or whatever, but it's next November is the scheduled date. And in our main goal is to pick up Stormlight 5 the day it comes out and to be Cosmere current on that day. So, something that we're going to try is we're going to try with our books for the first one or two parts of the book. We're going to try to cover them faster, more chapters in fewer episodes. And then once we get towards the end of the book, we will slow down our chapter count, slow down our word count for the Sanderlanche. I'm not sure if this is going to work. And today will be a good litmus test for us to see how that goes moving forward. If we decide that we can't cover enough in episodes per week based on the chapter count that we are doing, we will slow back down to something closer than what we were doing. But here goes an experiment. So we're going to be doing the entirety of part one of the Well of Ascension today. And if it's been a while since you guys picked up Mistborn, if you're listening to this, I'm going to have Eliot do a quick summary of what we've been reading for each episode that we're going to be doing. But before we do that, let's roll intro and then talk about The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. All right, Eliot. For our listeners who haven't read The Well of Ascension in a while, that it obviously spoilers. You need to have read this book to listen to this podcast. But if it's been a while, like for me, since you've read this book, what happens in part one of Mistborn?
Yeah, definitely set the scene a little bit here. I'm sure I'm gonna miss a few details, but to kind of hit some of the big highlights, we pick back up with our heroine Vin, and it's been a year, so in a whole year since the last story, the last time we've seen our characters. So a lot has happened, but we pick them up in a pretty predictable spot. I feel like they're trying to hold together their new empire or kingdom, I guess, that they've created. Elend is now king, and they're trying to play politics and defend their city against an army that has shown up on their doorstep, which happens to be Ellen's father, Straff Venture, who is coming presumably to forcibly take the city back. Vin is still bouncing around doing her Mistborn stuff. She's fighting assassins and trying to defend Elend and running into strange mist creatures and working with a Khandra who she manages to turn into a dog. It's kind of cool.
Mm.
And let's see, there's another Mistborn running around that she's calling the Watcher. Has an interesting interaction with that character. Sazed is out amongst the people trying to help them learn how to be a people again. Let's see what else. We learn a bit more about metals. We'll get into that. We kind of close the part one section with Breeze arriving back on the scene, having brought an entire other army to the scene. And so now we, instead of a two-party standoff, now have a three-party standoff between our heroes in the capital city of Luthadel, Straff Venture's army, and then another army under the command of someone named Set, I'm assuming is how you might
Mm-hmm.
pronounce that name.
Yes.
Set,
How do you spell it?
Venture, Heroes, Cett, I believe.
I would not have gotten that right if we
What
were
did you
doing a spell
What did you
check for the
say?
record.
T.
He says CETT.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. You said so, Elliot. However, important to note that Breeze showing up with an army is not an army to help our protagonists here. It's an army who want to overthrow the city, and there's now a big
Yes.
like stalemate kind of between the parties involved. That was actually really neat. That's something that kind of I didn't think about until he explains it right, of how whenever there's two forces against each other, it doesn't work out very good for the weaker force, right? But if you have three forces involved, then they can't attack the weak one without being exposed to the other. And it actually gives the weakest force kind of some more leverage of if they join forces with one or the other, then they're going to make the difference, you know. And I think that's it's just really clever of kind of a way to at least extend their time. But it's not looking great. Ooh, excuse me, for them right now.
I do think it's pretty funny that Breeze didn't send word of this plan at all. He kind of just shows up with a huge army on his tail. Then he's like, "Solved your problem. You're welcome." After they all, why did you bring us a second army to come destroy us? Like, no, I'm doing you a favor. The the dynamic of Vin kind of being assassin in chief, if you will, of the city. She's doing her best to keep everybody off Ellen's back, quite literally. Um, I think it's a cool one where she's definitely staying clear of all the politics, does not want to get involved in any of the running the city, that she's totally fine having Ellen do all of that. But she's found her niche in um serving Elend by protecting him. that's where she fits in. So I I thought this was a nice way to open the book again. We get a quick action scene, um, which I want to get into maybe at the end of the episode, the difference between early Brandon Sanderson writing and the newest Brandon Sanderson writing. We've when we were doing Mistborn 1, The Final Empire, we at the end of the episode we did some Stormlight stuff. Spoiler segment. At the end of this episode, I might do a Yumi and the Nightmare Painter stuff and talk a little bit about, and I want to compare specifically writing style. I noticed some very interesting differences between 2023 Brandon and 2008 Brandon, but I think we'll come back to that. Eliot, what between this new aluminum alloy or the Watcher or Sazed and what he's trying to investigate, what struck you the most? What do you want to talk about the most? Well, we'll get to them all, but which one's the most interesting line for you?
By far the most intriguing bit of part one is the figures in the mist.
Okay.
By far, super intrigued by those. I'm assuming the experience that Sazed had with watching a villager get like killed by the mist, and this being of some kind that Vin saw at least once, maybe twice. It's either once or twice of like the mist starting to take the form of a person, I think, or some sort of
Mm-hmm.
humanoid shape, and her getting this feeling that there's a being there. I don't remember if she's able to even use her allomancy to like detect somebody there or not, but like what is that about?
Yeah.
I'm I'm already really wanting to learn about the mist in general because of the events in the very end of the previous book here, where the mist played a role in the demise of the Lord Ruler. And I think it's specifically mentioned in this first part here that Vin can draw on the mist to
Mm-hmm.
feed her powers. That's explicitly said at one point in here, which I think we kind of concluded at the end of last book. But what's with these people in the mist? That seems new to me. I don't recall that before. I really want to know.
The Vin has an internal dialogue where she kind of muses on the fact that the ska hold her up as on this pedestal, and the rumors about her are more fantastic than what actually happened. That there was some like great mystical power that happened, that but she in her mind says, well, I just got lucky. I figured out what he was doing with his metal in his arm and then kind of just exploited his weakness. But I think, and Eliot, what you were just talking about, I think Vin's doing herself a disservice and might be intentionally avoiding a key line at the end of the book that Eliot you're latching onto is Vin drew upon the mists, is how the Final Empire closes, and then the Well of Ascension opens with she has not been able to replicate it. She does remember doing it, and she does remember that it's weird, but she hasn't been able to replicate it, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah, I was gonna point that out because I thought there was mention of like even in that moment she doesn't 100% know how she did it.
Right.
She wasn't like, I'm now going to call upon the mists, it just kind of like happened, I guess. Um so at least right now I don't know that it's like an innate thing for her, at least yet. If she can reliably do it, then she doesn't know how to yet.
I think even things like that play into the overarching theme about Vin for me, which is she consistently sees herself as worth less than she actually is.
Right.
She always has a lower value image of herself in her own mind. And completely agree with what you said. I think she does herself a big disservice in the credit she's due for standing up to the Lord Ruler, taking him down. That was a pretty incredible course of events at the end of the last book. And she's like, yeah, I was just kind of there. Like, what? Are you kidding me? That was very heroic what we saw. And she's like, it's kind of right place, right time. I was like, no, I I I said this multiple times throughout first book. After this part one of book two here, I'm very much in the same place. I really desperately want to see her journey be the journey to seeing her own self-worth. I think she still needs that. She's come a long way from the street urchin that we met her as. I think she still has a lot more, a long way to go to see her own value.
Yeah, I agree. What about aluminum 2 or the aluminum
Oh yeah,
alloy that we've discovered? She gets it on what, try 5, I believe, out of 40 known elements that they
Uh-huh.
know. Does it end up being aluminum and copper, I believe?
believe so.
And then
I think you're
I
right.
wrote it. Yes.
in chapter 9 maybe, we really figure out what exactly it does, or Vin skips to this conclusion of what it does, is that it kind of instant flares what you're currently burning. She doesn't figure that out the first time. She kind of blinds and deafens and her,
She's she's
herself
so
all at once.
she's so reckless. She's like in a terrible situation where she needs to do something desperate. She's like, "Oh, this metal that I don't know what it does. Quick, burn it all." It's like, "Vin, you're gonna kill yourself. Like, slow down."
Yeah. I was thinking about that reading this of like we don't I mean we see it come into effect a little bit, but you mostly just hear an explanation of yeah, if you burn the wrong metal, then you get sick and it doesn't work,
Mhm.
and all this stuff. Like it's not good for you. And here she knows this, but she just doesn't really care. She's like, we'll risk it. Just go
Yeah.
for it.
I don't know what it does, but middle of battle, just try it. Yeah, go for it. I was actually really interested in the Duralumin, I think is the name of it.
Irrelevant
The
is at least how they
They
say it in the
Okay,
audiobook.
call it duralumin.
Duralumin. Okay, I think I like that better actually. The yet again, Brandon surprised me in that I read that and was quite sure that he'd made that name up. But because I've been wrong before in this book, I Googled it. Sure enough, that is a well known and established alloy of aluminum mixed with copper. So I learned something. Duralumin
Nice.
is a very real thing and the correct name for that alloy.
Well, then
Uh,
I am learning that now for the first time too, because I thought it was also just a made up thing. Like,
yeah,
oh, okay, that's fun. Duralumin. Yeah, that's a fun, fantastical version of
right.
aluminum and copper.
See, I did know
Nope, you could.
duralumin was a real alloy, but the things I do and don't know are kind of interesting because I still didn't know that allomancer was just the combination of the words alloy and
Oh no.
necromancer back in the day. But now I do know that. So education all around.
Yes, there we go.
And I thought the actual ability that you get from it was entirely logical. We learned in the last book that if you burn aluminum or if someone forces you to burn aluminum, it destroys or sucks up or negates all of your other metals that you have. The Inquisitors forced Vin to burn aluminum after they captured her in order to like cleanse her of her metals that she's ingested, so she can't use her powers. So for duralumin, our alloy, to do something similar but opposite made perfect sense. She burns this alloy of aluminum and it consumes all of the metals she's actively burning, but it greatly enhances their effects and she uses this to pretty incredible effect in chapter 11 when you get down to the end. It's either 10 or 11 where she goes to the rescue Breeze as he's trying to make it back, and she like full on like Superman flies
Make,
through the air using this.
makes a breeze of the enemy soldiers.
Yeah,
That
indeed.
That was a good one, Trevor. Really
thanks.
good.
Sorry, couldn't resist. Yes.
Fatherhood is doing wonders for your sense of humor.
Yes. Thank you. I did think it was interesting that Vin does not really have any pity for the horses of said army. She makes quite the pyre of dead people and horses on this enemy army coming.
I don't remember the phrase exactly, but I don't remember exactly, but somewhere in there in this scene that you're mentioning, Trevor, it says like a scream of equine pain, and I
Yes.
was like, that's really sad. Like that's just really sad imagery there.
She spared no expense for the horses.
Yeah.
I do think we've just seen a pretty significant level up in power here
Mm-hmm.
for, as of right now, just Vin. Like what she's able to do with these incredibly boosted metals is massive. Like it's another order of magnitude up. She's got a significant advantage over even other Allomancers because she can now do these incredible things by supercharging her abilities.
Right. I mean, we just saw it happen with steel, and we can assume what it uses with pewter. Is there anything else that we know of that would be really interesting to burn this with? What happened with gold? Remember what gold does?
My
Gold
best
was the
memory is that how was gold how Vin saw the Lord Ruler as like the old man Lord Ruler and understood
That was the 11th
what was
metal.
going on? That's
Gold
right. That's
Gold
right.
was the one where she saw an alternate version of herself, and she really didn't
Okay.
like it and said, "I'm never burning gold again." What? So either the 11th metal or gold. Same question. What would happen if you flared, for lack of a better term, with duralumin? Anything?
like a super flare. Yeah, that's a great question.
You
Great
see
question.
yourself as a baby? Like,
Maybe.
That's a really good question, Trevor. So I mean okay. Thinking about what she saw, that's the only time we've seen gold be burned, right?
I think so. I think Kelsier
Is
burns it and she burns it, and that's
That's right.
it.
So she burns gold and she sees herself like kind of as she is now, right? Or was it in the past?
I don't remember. I think she sees herself as a street urchin.
Okay. My my general memory on it is that she basically just kind of sees herself, or it may be like how you see yourself, how you think of yourself, or
Oh
something
yeah.
weird like that, something kind of meta like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so how the derailment apparently works is it like super pushes. It's basically using all that power to that you could use spreading out your burning your gold like in a flash is what it seems to do.
Right.
So I don't know what would happen with amplifying that. Like
Right.
the others we can quantitatively measure. I feel
Right.
like pewter, yeah, you punch really hard for 1 second kind of thing. But like with this, I don't know. Do you like super see yourself?
Yeah.
How you think of yourself? I
Like
don't I don't
I don't
know.
know what that means. Like
Yeah, the the military advantage of this seems high. At least for her like pewter and steel and iron abilities. If she is the only Mistborn who knows about this alloy, and if she can keep it that way, that's a big advantage. I mean, obviously, ATM is kind of your yes, you have an advantage or you don't over another like Mistborn. But if she can like catch a Mistborn off guard with a super duper punch from her pewter, like I could see that being a big deal.
She did just show it off for both armies in broad daylight, though.
We're gonna know she has something, but they're not gonna know how.
Sure. But she what jumped like half a mile in one leap or whatever it was. It was like that's not
Yeah,
normal.
true.
What about let's talk more about the mists and the dudes in the mists. Eliot, are these is what Sazed is seeing and hearing and what Vin is seeing, are they related? Yes, no.
I have very little to go off of, but in my mind they're the same
Okay.
in that we're seeing the mist. I want to go two directions here. And I feel like we're a little early to even try and draw conclusions. We haven't gotten a lot of evidence on this. One of two things is happening. Either the mist is acting of its own accord, that there is a being or beings that are the mist or are part of the mist and can act and influence the world, and they just choose to appear as human type forms or something like that. Second, there's invisible beings that are revealed by the mist, and that
Okay.
like their interaction with the mist causes them to be seen for a moment,
Hmm.
or they are traveling in the mist for other reasons and they're like not normally visible, but when they're in the mist sometimes they are, something like that. And so the two descriptions seemed really similar to me
Hmm.
of what Sazed saw during the day and what Vin saw during the night. So, and until I get evidence otherwise, I'm assuming we're encountering similar beings or mist taking actions. Either way, pretty terrifying. Very, very terrifying. I don't know. It's a funny twist on things actually because we start the first book being terrified of the mist. Like all the ska are like, "Oh, don't go out in the mist, bad things happen." And we spend the entire book establishing that that's just an old wives' tale and the mist is perfectly fine. Vin gets comfortable with it. Vin and Kelsey are have long conversations about, "Oh yeah, I actually feel more comfortable in the mist because it's fun. It's my nighttime." And now we open this book with, "Oh, but yeah, now there's people in the mist that will murder you if you're not watching."
Yes. In broad daylight, not just at night.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't remember what's going on here, but I'm not going to hypothesize because we've seen where that gets us in the past where
Yeah.
I don't remember, but I'm just casually spoiling stuff because I subconsciously do remember and I'm making good guesses.
Judgments.
Right.
Yeah.
But so I'm not gonna guess, but I don't remember what's going on here.
I I guess one thing I'll just throw out real quick before we move on. I'm still in the hunt for where's the investiture.
Okay.
I'm still, trying to find, that which I won't go into too many crazy theories because I know we're trying to stay spoiler free for some other stuff, but I'm I'm looking at the metal and thinking, okay, potential investiture there. I'm looking at now the mist as okay, potential investiture there. And that could have explanations or ties into why there might be people or beings in the investiture mist.
Because of how book one ended and she drew upon the mist, quote unquote.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. What about the Watcher? What about this other I think that's just Vin's edgy name for him. I don't think he's ever named himself. I think
Mhm.
Vin's just a little dramatic and enjoys being so. There's another Mistborn that is hanging out in the city, deliberately not helping her with. Well, I shouldn't say that. Deliberately not going after Vin like in an aggressive way, but obviously trying to like get her attention. And he hasn't threatened Elend yet, so that's why Vin's not super concerned. Um, but trying to make himself known to Vin. What do we think of the Watcher?
Didn't have too many thoughts on the Watcher because I feel like I would just be completely guessing at this point.
Right.
He seems to be. a new character, seems to be maybe independent, out for his own. Yeah, noticeably does not attack Vin necessarily. There's the one battle she has where he's like just there watching, but then he intervenes in moments. Did he save her? I don't remember.
He
I think he did, right?
he shoots a coin at the smoker in the assassin group and then
Yeah.
kills him, and then that reveals to Vin that there's another smoker, aka a Mistborn,
Mm,
in the group.
mhm.
So he is actively helping Vin in that scenario, which is why I didn't continue my phrase there that he's not like actively helping, because he did.
Right,
But he's also not like, down there with her punching and zipping coins through people's faces and stuff like that.
right. So I have him tentatively marked as not enemy. That could change. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure any predictions that we have I think will be quickly dispelled, and we'll figure out exactly what he's doing here. So
I am curious to see if a trend will continue. In book 1, at least 3 or 4 times, I expressly asked Brandon to answer questions for me, and then he immediately did in upcoming chapters.
yeah,
And that caught me off guard because in Stormlight, that hardly ever happens. I ask Brandon questions, and I don't get my answers for a long time. And so now I think my pendulum is swinging the other way. Now I'm expecting to get answers quickly. So I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not even gonna wonder about this watcher because surely they're gonna tell me here in another chapter or 2." We'll see if that's wrong or not.
yeah. And I'm gonna talk about this more once we do our full podcast spoilers for everything we've read at the end of the episode here. But I am curious also to see exactly the dynamic of when Sanderson is comfortable leaving mysteries to later and when he feels like he needs to reveal, because specifically in this chapter, or in this part 1, I feel like we still got a lot of what I put as metal splaining in um in the chapters, whereas in more modern, more recent Brandon Sanderson books, I feel like he is more confident in his own ability to reveal to you things when you should know them, not necessarily immediately. So we talked about that a lot last book, is that we're getting a lot of reveals right away, as opposed to Stormlight, which that doesn't necessarily happen. So, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later.
I have a question for you. In On the next thing that I wanna talk about, I want your opinion. Who makes the cooler wolfhound companion? Orsur Orsur? I cannot say that name in my head, by the way. Or Orsur? Or
Or Sir. They skipped the E
o
in
I was gonna say,
Orsur.
I
Okay.
feel
or
like I
Sir.
don't really hear the R much in the audiobook. It's just like Osur, Osur, Osur. Yeah, maybe it is way harder than I thought.
Orsur?
Osur,
That
Osur,
they specific
Osur.
I know it's one word in the book, but they specifically put it into two separate like syllables, so it's definitely like or Sir in the audiobook, if that helps you.
Okay, it does. Anyway, back to my question. Who is the cooler wolfhound companion, Orsur or Huon from the Silmarillion?
I mean, I would 100% say Huon, from the Silmarillion, um, but I won't get into. I'm not gonna get into, uh, too much more about or Sir. Um, Now it is very different. They're very different. Um, because our hound companion here isn't necessarily a hound itself.
Yeah.
It is a Khandra who is using a hound's body, which I think is really cool. I love the scene where, for two reasons. I love the scene where they're kind of running through the city,
Mhm.
And Vin is impressed that he's keeping up because he has this hound body, you know. And then they kind of have a little moment of she kind of tries to be like, okay, well, let's see you do this, and then she leaps, she like pushes herself way off,
Mhm.
and he has to catch up, you know, because he can't do that. And he's like, why would you want to do that? Like, you should move so that I can be near, so that I can still help, you know. Um, I think it was kind of neat because Vin seems to not love her assistant here uh, too much. She feels very icky about him and stuff. So it's kind of
And
interesting
I
to see
gotta
that.
I gotta admit, I think I feel kind of icky about him too. Like it seems clear that he's tied to his contract and he must obey it. It seems like every third line he says is, I shall obey the contract, or something to that effect. And, but there's just something about a servant who is serving their master for no other reason than they have to that gets me suspicious. And it seems like everyone's like, "Oh yeah, he's a Khandra. He can't betray you. He has to do everything that you say." I'm over here like, "Eh, um, I'm nervous. I don't like this guy.
That's fair. Maybe I'm the only one, but I I didn't have problems trusting him. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, he just has to do his
I
thing, you know. And I guess we haven't seen or heard really of from other Khandra, but um, but like I was almost thinking it's more of a social quirk that they have. It's just they're very matter of fact, very
Yeah.
professional, if you will. Like, we're not going to get into personal details. It's just, yes, I will do this because it's in my job description. We don't need to talk about anything beyond that, kind of thing. Was kind of how I've read into it, I guess.
Do you guys remember how Kelsier bought the contract from Orser?
no.
Paul?
I don't remember for sure.
Kelsier gives
Was it kind of
Orser
inherent?
Atium. He buys his contract with Atium, which I think is interesting because the amount of weight they put on the contract would imply that they put equal as much weight on Atium, and why and what they need Atium for is a big question for me right now. On the other flip side of that, in this part, Vin just uses up the very last of their known Atium in the city. Atium is now, if it was before a scarce resource, now it's almost unobtainable. Vin is out of Atium fighting this other Mistborn in chapter 2, and they have not been able to find that massive warehouse of Atium that we were talking about in the last book that apparently exists somewhere. Um, they don't think Straff has it. They weren't sure, or they don't know, but they were pretty positive that he didn't bring it with him when he left. Because the Venture House was in charge of the Atium mines, the pits of Hatsin. So if anyone knows where the Atium is being stored, assuming it hasn't been moved, would be who?
Straff Venture
Right,
or
Straff Venture, and he just
Ellen? I
and,
mean,
and he just showed back up. Well, Ellen specifically, he's been like, I didn't really care about anything that my house was doing. I didn't pay attention. Um, so now that Straff is back, I think him maybe knowing where the ATM is could be a big pivotal um point of contention moving forward. Is I know where your ATM is. Oh, you haven't found it yet? That's a bummer. I'm gonna go get it, or I'm gonna sneak in and get it, or whatever.
or a negotiation, tactic
Right.
where we just talked about how we're about to enter into a three-way standoff. I could see that becoming an offer or leverage. if he goes into that negotiation with that claim of, oh yeah, and you want to help me because I know where all the ATM is.
Yeah, he could talk to Set, the other army that just showed up, and
Mm-hmm.
said, "Help me take the city. I get the city, you get the ATM, you go back home." Yeah,
Sure.
that could definitely be a interesting. What else? Anything else catch your eyes in this part?
Noted the continuing themes and exploration of religion. And there's an interesting scene. I don't remember exactly where it is or even who's talking, but they're commenting on the fact that Kelsier has partially intentionally left behind a religion,
Yeah.
complete with a saint or martyr in himself. But and they talk about this in the scene, it's a religion with now a fairly strong following. There's all these people who, you know, talk about following the survivor, and yet there's no actual doctrine associated with said religion. It's kind of this, wave, this excitement that's drawn people into it, but it doesn't actually have any meat to it. There's no beliefs associated with this religion. It's just the following of the survivor who sacrificed himself to save the city.
Yeah, that is really interesting. The Ska, I mean, he gave the Ska something to believe in and
Right.
to overthrow the Lord Ruler, and that was obviously where his plans ended. Like that. Now what is the question for Vin and Elend trying to hold this together for so many people? And Vin really has an issue with how highly people hold Kelsier, and she knew him as a man. She knew him as a guy who had certainly heroic moments, but flaws as well. And it really bothers her that they worship not only him but her as well. So
And interestingly enough, part of that conversation about Kelsier, and he's come up a couple times in our characters' discussions of, well, what would Kelsier do? Or, man, I wish Kelsier was here. He'd know what to do. And Elland in particular is like bothered by the fact that he feels like he has to live up to Kelsier. He feels like Kelsier has set this standard that he's trying to live up to. And he's talking with Vin about it at one point, and part of their conversation actually hit on a really awesome quote that I noted down. It comes from Vin, but it surprised me because we don't usually get throw pillow quotes until like the Sanderlanche.
yeah,
Usually in the midst of like the chaotic epic moments, you have those, pithy things that characters say in the big moment. This was just a casual conversation in like the early first 5 chapters of the book, and it almost caught me off guard. It's like, "Oh, wow, that was your philosophy right there." I'll read it for you real quick just because I thought it was a great one. Let's see. It starts with they're talking about, can Ellen live up to Kelsier's standard, and Ellen says this: good men. Oh, let me go back. Vin says this first. You, Ellen Venture, are a good man, a truly good man. Good men don't become legends, he said quietly. And here's the good quote: good men don't need to become legends. They simply do what's right anyway. I was like, ooh, that's a good quote right there.
nice job, Vin.
I'm glad you brought this up, Elliot, because this stuck out to me too. I didn't actually remember this nod. Like compared to Stormlight, I think of Mistborn more so of like as like a more so a fun action book series, more
Mm.
so than like the Stormlight. We see a lot more like messages about character and things like that, nobility and things, more so than we see in here on average. But this was different. This kind of showcased that more, and I really like it. I think it was really well woven in, and I'm really glad that you brought that quote out because that is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, I I feel like this is a something that Seiza would say. Um,
Yeah.
and it came from Vin,
Mhm.
which is interesting.
Yeah. It's neat to see that kind of profound thought coming from Vin, because she is kind of like the street urchin character, the one who doesn't have any, typically doesn't have the like profound thoughts and deeper meanings of things, right? More naive in general. So it's neat having that here.
And up until this point, one of Vin's core character elements is the fact that she doesn't trust anybody.
Right.
She's been betrayed by everyone, and so a big part of her story is learning to trust people. What an incredibly trusting thing for her to just say to Elend, to say, "No, you are a truly good man, and you don't need to be a legend. You just do the right thing." Is like, wow,
Yeah, I certainly think Vin from 2 years ago would not say that. And the fact
not at all.
that Vin is being supportive of Elend in his moment of weakness is really cool. I think watching Vin grow is something that's done well here with this line. Something that I noted while listening to these chapters, I I don't know why, but reading specifically this, you know what? I have to Stormlight spoiler this, and it's for like a dumb reason. So I actually have to save this for like a couple minutes. Um, so hold that thought. Um,
You want to segue somewhere else while we finish up our Mistborn stuff?
right. So to um finish up the part, our big dramatic drop at the end of the part is, so we found a body in the castle, and
Oh,
Vinin.
it's better. It's better than that even. I laughed out loud at the irony of this. Literally, the cleaning crew finds a skeleton in the closet.
Yeah, that's true.
Literally, the cleaning crew goes in and says, you've got a basket of bones in your closet. Is that a problem?" Like, I laughed out loud at how I don't even know, goofy that was in the moment.
I guess I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, that's pretty funny. The they report it to Ellen, and they're like, you got bones in your closet, right? Is that a problem? And Ellen and Vin are like, I mean, we knew these were here. Thanks for not sounding the alarm or anything. Um, and then Captain Demu, actually, who last or when we met him last book, I actually said he was my favorite character of the first three. I don't know if you guys remember me saying that, but Captain Demu is the one who reports this, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm sure you got your reasons. I'm not going to ask. So should I just dispose of the other one as well?" And then they're like, "That's one is news to us." So there's our there's our big name, or not name drop, reveal at the end of the part. The conclusion they come to is there's a Khandra in Ellen's staff somewhere that has taken the place of someone. And the conclusion they jump to, which I'm not actually necessarily on board with, is, well, if you're going to go with infiltrating, you might as well infiltrate Ellen's inner circle. So then they immediately start thinking, okay, is it Breeze? Is it Ham? Is it Spook? Who is it? And I was like, really? Like, I I wouldn't immediately assume it was one of them. I would just assume it would be like, you know, one of the guards, or maybe even Captain Demu himself, or somebody who's close, but not necessarily like in the inner circle. Because I feel like if you're having a bunch of conversations with Ellen, you're going to get revealed because you don't know some things that you should know. So you're going to be close, but you're not going to be spoken to, I think.
Something that Vin says though is worrying. She reflects on how convincing a imposter or Sir was as
Renew, yeah.
Renault.
Renew.
Yeah. and how that was a challenge for them. Was he had to be able to speak with people who knew that person before, and he did it. He was able to do his homework and knew what to say and passed himself off convincingly. So Vin is terrified of, oh, is this other Khandra gonna be that effective as well? Do we need to worry? So yeah, I don't know, 50-50 maybe on whether it's actually one of our heroes or if it's just random guard number 6.
Right. I would lean towards not number 6, but number 5, random guard number 5.
Oh, okay, sure.
Um, and not heroes, but that's not the conclusion our heroes come to. Anything else for part 1 before we get into Stormlight stuff and maybe other Cosmere stuff as well?
One quick prediction just to throw it out there so I can say I told you so if my 1% chance is complete later.
Okay.
There's a brief mention in one of the chapters that Vin's earring. Do you remember Vin's earring? It came up a couple times before. It was given to her by her mother,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
it comes from her mother somehow. And it's been
Yes.
mentioned a few times. It's important to her.
Okay.
It's mentioned at one point that that earring is bronze,
Okay.
Okay.
and I want to make a prediction that that is going to be important. That she either has a I don't know the right term yet. I the prediction would be something along the lines of, like, feruchemy is involved. That earring is a, like, bronze receptacle of whatever bronze holds in the feruchemy world that I don't
Bronze
know yet.
mind. Yeah.
Is that the term? I wanted to use
No.
that as a term,
No,
but
I
I
don't
figured
think
that
so.
might be
I
wrong.
don't think so. I'm sorry.
The only reason why
Okay.
copper mind is used is because copper is used to store memories.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yes.
Because also mentioned in this part, which we actually haven't talked about him yet. Marsh, his nickname is Iron Eyes before he even comes an Inquisitor, which
Mhm.
I believe they're iron spikes through the eyes as an Inquisitor. But yeah, anyway, it does matter what metal you're pierced with. So yes, it is interesting that you're bringing this up. I didn't think about this.
So I don't know enough yet to predict exactly what this is going to be, but what I'm going to predict is whatever you can store in bronze as a feruchemist is stored in that earring that she has. Her mother is somehow involved. That's the prediction.
Okay, interesting. What does bronze do for an Allomancer?
Bronze is your like detect other people, right?
Yeah, it's like the inverse of copper, right?
Oh yeah,
It's
Right.
like you can sense other allomancers.
is that the
It's
blue
like
line
how the
one where all the metals are
no,
have a?
is that's not no, that's not
Oh no, bronze is
that's
the
tin.
listening to other metals being burned one.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's like what the Inquisitors do when they run around and are inquisiting, right? Like they're
Right.
like
Okay.
using that to try and sense other allomancers.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Wow. Yes, you're absolutely right. And we know that in the Inquisitors can pierce copper clouds with their bronze,
Oh,
which Finn can also do
and she
maybe
doesn't know
because
why.
she has a special bronze earring that's giving her said ability.
Oh,
Mm,
That's interesting. That's something I've never thought about
okay.
interesting.
as to
Okay.
why, if she's able to.
I I don't know if you're right, but I also don't know if you're wrong either. So
Yeah.
interesting.
I
I
I think
never
I might
caught
just I
I
think I
never
might just add that onto the prediction. That just popped into my mind
yeah.
when you started talking about Inquisitors there, but I am going to officially amend my prediction to add that.
All right. I did not actually realize that it was bronze specifically. I thought we just had mentioned that it was like, oh, she has an earring.
I did pick up that it was bronze in this part. It does specifically say so. I didn't think anything of it until Eliot's bringing it up, but
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. Um, any other predictions for like the plot of the book, Eliot? Now that we are at the end of part one, we've got both armies outside the gate. We've got the mist doing weird stuff. Any predictions on where this book is going or not going?
The the epigraphs have me appropriately confused at this point. They're they're even giving me names, which should be telling me who they're talking about, and I don't know the names. So I'm like, well, hang on a second. I thought I knew who you were talking about, and now I don't. So I don't even have any predictions to throw in on that. But like, where's the book going? I think it's going into the past again. I think we're going to get more explanation of what happened, and the deepness wasn't a glaring omission from the last book.
Mm-hmm.
We were all scared of the deepness, and oh, we I stopped the deepness by saving y'all and made you my slaves to save you, sort of thing, from the Lord Ruler. Like, all of this was justified by, oh yeah, I defended you from the deepness, or I defended you from something, and we got this ominous like, oh, you just defeated me. Well, you're about to get crushed by what I was protecting you from, kind of vibes
Oh
from the
yeah.
Lord Ruler. So I think where we're probably going to go is learning more about the past, what happened at the Well of Ascension, title of the book,
Mm.
and where are we going to go in the present? I don't really know. I mean, we lost our big bad villain, so we kind of need a new one. It doesn't feel like Straff Venture is an appropriate big bad villain, so I'm kind of looking for a new big bad villain we need to take down by end of the book. So I don't really know. I don't know.
Okay.
My big prediction is the one I just threw at you with that earring and Vin's mother. I think we're going to get a revelation there that is going to be a twist.
Sounds good. All right. I can no longer just call this Stormlight stuff at the end of the episode because I'm also going to be including Yumi because I want to include Yumi. So anything that the podcast has covered is now Stormlight is now spoiler free zone or spoiler inclusive zone, I should say. So this is kind of a goofy thing to put in here because usually we talk about like big Cosmere implications in this section. Um, what is with Brandon Sanderson and duel scenes? Like, I don't know if you guys remember Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. There's like 3 duel scenes per book in the Stormlight Archive. There's like a bunch of duel scenes of Adolin, and then there's Kaladin and Zyle, and then there's Dalinar doing his wrestling duels in Oathbringer and how everybody's like afraid of him. And it made me think that there's a duel scene between Vin and Ham, I believe,
Yes.
in this part. And as I was listening to it, it dawned on me. I don't know if this is because he was doing it well or if it was because he was doing it poorly. That this was really just an exposition, stand here and talk scene in thin disguise. That Vin and Ham were like, you're getting like action verbs of like jumped and swooped and punched, and but what the real meat of the chapter is Elend and Clubs and Spook, I believe, watching this and giving us exposition on everything that's happening in the Final Empire, or I don't even think they're calling it the Final Empire anymore, but in Elend's Empire. Um, so that made me think: is this some like writing tool that Brandon Sanderson has learned in his early writing career? That if you need to sit and talk about something, you need to have them watching an action sequence. That way the reader doesn't get bored by reading an action sequence, or at least they think they are. But what you're really doing is telling them about this other thing that's going on. But they're watching Vin and Ham punch each other. So that's exciting, right? Sorry. I just had to
Or
I just had
even a
to
way
talk about that.
you could absolutely be onto something because, like, if you think about it, it could be a way to give all of your readers what they want. Your people that just want action can tune out the lore discussion and just key in on the action. your people that are desperate for the lore explanations just tune out the whacking each other with sticks and listen to the lore part.
Right.
Like by mixing it all together, you can kind of allow the reader to pay attention to whatever interests them the most.
Right.
It's an
Because
interesting thought.
it happened, now that I'm really thinking about it, it happened in the last book too. Kelsier has the duel scene with some random soldier A who's insubordinate, and the point of the scene is to become religious figure for the army. But if we're just showing up and showing off our abilities, it's kind of boring. What if we made a fight out of it? So I don't know. I'm on to you, Brandon. I've gotcha. Can't fool me. Every time there's a duel, I'm gonna figure out, all right, what are we actually trying to learn here? Did you guys see the stark difference that I was talking about earlier between 2008 writing Brandon Sanderson and 2023 from Yumi? I really noticed that we were getting a lot of metal splaining from Brandon, and I wonder if that comes from him being a young author and being influenced from other people. Because if you juxtapose that with Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, his most recent published work, he tells you he tells you mechanics of what's happening once and when he wants to. He doesn't tell you over and over, this is a steel push, this is a iron pole, this is a pewter punch. Like he does not reiterate himself near as much as Mistborn. Now, obviously the magic systems are different, and there's a lot of like ambiguity that goes with Yumi and Stormlight, whereas Mistborn is supposed to be very like scientific. um but I just, it really stuck out to me that the amount of times it's being re regurgitated to us in Mistborn.
So, okay, I have some thoughts on this. One, okay, so I think it is kind of a result of the magic system here.
Okay.
I'm thinking about it of there's these 10 different elementic metals and they all do different things, right? So on the fly in an action sequence, for example, like you don't have to specify what is going on, but for it to make sense to the reader and for it to like to understand the gravitas of the fight, right, or whatever's going on, I feel like there's a little bit of specification needed of like flaring pewter to jump away or to get a big hit in or whatever, or the way there's a lot of like pushing and pulling of coins and all this stuff, um it is kind of hard to keep up with, but I think it's just kind of a byproduct of the magic system and how it is. um I'm thinking also like I was also thinking about this of if you ever adapted it to a different medium, right? Like if you tried to make this a movie, you would have awesome action sequences. It'd be so cool. It'd be absolutely epic. But I was thinking it'd be kind of hard to portray all the things, right?
Yeah.
It would be hard to show that I'm now burning pewter, right? You could punch someone and they go flying instead of just getting hit, right? Like that conveys it well. But in like a Mistborn versus Mistborn kind of duel, right? Like I feel like it wouldn't be super easy to convey that. You would have to see a lot of like from Vin's perspective kind of thing, I imagine. But even still, I feel like that's just a natural difficulty maybe of this magic system. It probably is, like my understanding is that it is maybe more largely the magic system, and then secondarily, like, I think Brandon has really improved as a writer, and you can tell and stuff. So
I think it's also an artifact of Brandon knows that his readers have faith in him. And so he can rely on that faith and not explain everything that's going on because 2023 Brandon knows that his readers will stick with him through the uncertainty or without everything being explained, whereas 2008 Brandon doesn't have that luxury.
Right.
He doesn't have that much of a understanding of his reader and fan base to be able to bank on the fact that they're going to go with the flow or trust that, they're gonna follow the nuances and the details without getting told every couple of paragraphs what metal's at work.
Yeah. Paul, going back to your adaptation thing, this is kind of related, but it brought this to mind again, and I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the podcast, so I'm going to now. Adapting a Sanderson book into a movie could get really like cluttery really quick. Specifically like breaths, spren, and metals. I think all three are going to be really hard to pull off on screen, and I've thrown the idea around in my head of you could make with modern technology, you could make two versions of a film. One, you could make like a normal high fantasy action film, and only portray to the viewer what they need to know, like for the casual audience. So for Stormlight, that would be Sylphrena, like a major lashing, and shard blades would be the only thing really visualized. But then you could make a B reel, not the app, but like a second version of the movie. You could make how do I explain this? You could code it with like a VR headset to where if you put on this VR headset and watched the movie, you could then see all of like the wind spren, the pain spren, all of the like the extra clutter on the screen if you wanted to. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but this is an idea for sure that you could, because if you read the beginning of The Way of Kings, he really goes heavy into flame spren, wind spren. Like he really leans heavy into you have no idea what's going on here. And then once he explains it in like Oathbringer, then he kind of backs off. He doesn't really talk about like low spren anymore in Rhythm of War. Or like the span read mechanics and all that like weird minutia stuff. I think if you're going to adapt that correctly, it's going to get not pleasant to watch. It's not going to be like a normal fantasy book. There's just going to be like little red dots flying around the screen everywhere. But I feel like you could make some sort of software where you could opt into that if you want. Or
have the more immersive experience,
right.
I guess, if
or
you really want to feel like you're on Roshar.
Exactly. You could also do like a 360 environment thing with it as well, where you could like be watching the scene in front of you and turn around and see like the high storm coming or something like that. Anyway, when you were talking about the metals, you could do like a different glow for what metal is being used, and you could opt into that, or normal action sequence is just bin punches dude, and that's for the 90% of the audience that doesn't care about what metal's being burned. Anyway, there's my new age movie spiel.
There we go. I have thought about this a bit, actually. I feel like Mistborn would be one of the easier Brandon Sanderson movies or books to adapt, because it's fairly easy to wrap your head around. There's 10 metals you can use, and they do these different things, and you're going to learn about what each metal does, and then you get to see it in practice. You get to see a lot of awesome action and a good storyline, right? Stormlight is a bit more of a beast. There's a lot of hypothetical games, theoretical stuff, more like literal, like hard physics and mechanics and things like that. And so I honestly think Stormlight would be best as like a show, like a TV show, just for the hour time that you would get and the storylines you'd get to follow, like, following the different characters around would be a lot easier in a TV series format. But kind of digress about that. but you know,
Well,
I'd love to see it on screen one day.
Warbreaker will surely have an epilepsy warning at the beginning of the movie. Like there's no other way to show Warbreaker besides literally blinding your audience. I don't know how you put that one on screen. All right. Anything else for part 1 of the Well of Ascension?
Just super quick to throw it out there. I should have snuck this in before we kicked out our Stormlight free people, but just to throw it in to keep my streak alive, I did put a little bit of thought into a theme for this part 1 of Well of Ascension, and just to summarize it briefly, the word I came to was specters, and I keyed into like the ghostly aspect of the term specter in the mist figures that we talked about. The our Khandra is rather spectery in my mind. They're kind of ghostly or ghastly or however you want to think about it. But then the other kind of sense of the word specter in that overarching thing you feel like is just hovering over you. I feel like Kelsier has become that. Kelsier
Mm.
is like a specter, maybe in a more positive sense of the word, over all of our heroes. They've kind of got this example of Kelsier they're trying to live up to, and then just lastly the specter of war hanging over our plot at this point with the armies hanging outside of the wall. So if I had to slap a theme on part 1, it would be specters, and yeah, I think that covers all my thoughts.
Sounds good. Let's reconvene next week. I don't know chapter split for next week, so I'll figure that out and let you guys know. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
See ya.
Fantastic. See y'all later.